In traditional Theravada Buddhism, there are a number of ways that one can open to or access cessation. The first way is simply serendipitous. There are a very, very small number of people who can stumble into cessation or have it spontaneously arise. I've only seen a couple of instances of that, so I don't think it's very common. The most common, the standard way one would approach cessation would be if one showed up at my teacher's monastery, they would put them on breath awareness and work on the breath awareness jhanas, go through the extensive practices of samatha, the purification of mind practices, are also called concentration meditation practices. And then one would begin the vipassana. The vipassana there is very different than vipassana here. Here, as most of you know, it's taught as mindfulness. And that's a practice that's taught in some Theravadan temples, monasteries in Asia, but not all. In the Pawak monastery, you would go through, first you'd start with the four elements, earth, water, fire, and air, analyzing each, getting in touch with each characteristic of each of the elements. And the advanced practice of that culminates in one witnessing one's body, experiencing one's body as kalapas, subatomic particles. So you actually see, if you have inner sight or felt sense, you experience your body as these kalapas. And when I experienced it, the kalapas looked like fireflies, like just a pile of fireflies on my zafu. That's what I saw. And I went in to interview with Pawak right afterwards. He had this incredible knack for calling you in right after some big event happened in your practice. So he called me in and he said, "How, basically, how's it going?" And I said, "I don't think it's going very well." I said, I saw like this pile of fireflies. I said, "Obviously I'm doing something wrong, And he said, no, that's it. It's like, what? I never heard of kalapas at that point. I was a Zen guy. I mean, this was all new to me. And that was as far as I went with the vipassana with him, because he, although he wanted me to continue, he offered to ordain me and asked me to move to Myanmar and all. Fundamentally, there was a point on the path where one had to commit to the traditional Theravadan path, to the Arahant model. And I realized how connected I was to the Bodhisattva model of Zen tradition. The Arahant model is really, as I mentioned the other day, it's aimed towards getting off the wheel of existence. So wanting to get out of the world in the shortest route possible. And I don't feel that way. I feel that I resonate with the Bodhisattva vow of returning lifetime after lifetime, both in terms of developing one's individual practice, but also teaching or helping others. So for that reason, even though I a couple times tried to do retreat with him, it wasn't possible to do. But one starts with kalapas, then the practice is they have to be meditatively analyzed. You have to be able to have enough depth of concentration and stability that you can effectively, in the time that this firefly is blinking, you can connect with it and you can perceive a number of characteristics. It's something like 8 or 10 characteristics, whether it's male or female kalapa. So kalapas come in genders, in case you didn't know. And as I said, I didn't do the analysis. I mean, I kind of played around with it a little bit, but I never did it officially. And then one goes through analyzing the kalapas of mentality and materiality. So you're breaking these things down. We hold them in a way like they're a physical reality, and really they're not. So as we name the concepts, as we identify them meditatively, they somehow move out of concept. And there's a way that we don't have as much allegiance to the conceptual structuring. It just loosens the identity of me somehow. It just unplugs little pieces. So anyway, so they progress through that, and then at some point they do dependent origination. And the way they do it is one recalls the past 5 lifetimes. So you have to do the immediate past 5 lifetimes from this lifetime. And you have to do it with great specificity. You have to be able to communicate, identify to the teacher the name of the individual, where they lived, their spouse and children's names, what they did for a living, favorite food, relatives' names, things like this. I mean, very specific information. And the point of this would be for one to see one's trajectory of practice over those 5 lifetimes, ending in this lifetime or concluding in this lifetime, and to see the intention to practice. So part of it is to fan the flames of wanting to be an arahant and get off the wheel of existence. And then one does the next lifetimes, the next 3 or 5 lifetimes. I don't remember the number at the moment. And the main aspect of that is seeing, again, the intention for practice, and it's hope that you will see the lifetime where you become an arahant. So the motivation is there. Oh, I really want that to happen. And then hopefully you'll progress in the path and you'll shorten those lifetimes, because that can change based on your karma. And so once one finishes that, then there's some analysis that's done, and the couple of practices before one engages cessation. There's one that has to do, which is something that they teach here in the West, which is monitoring experience and the arising and the passing away of experience. So it's being with what's happening, say, in your body, holding it non-conceptually, so getting beneath the concept. And then we can begin to see the conditioned nature, the arising, the decay, the passing away. And the focus is on the passing away. And when that gets deep enough, when we get enough concentrated enough, that can open the door to cessation. But that approach is one that generally results in a lot of fear, because the reality that we know, that we have around us, will begin to dissolve. It begins to pass away. And that's part of how cessation opens in that practice. And it's very destabilizing for people. I've worked with a couple of people who did it that way, and we had to work on, and the last segment you work, there are 8 insights in traditional Vipassana, and the 7th insight, I believe it's the 7th, is the insight of terror. So it's this fear of the whole world dissolving and cessation opening. It's, the people have described it really in very frightening terms. Their whole world was just melting, and this emptiness was, this profound emptiness was opening. So that's a traditional way. And I talked to Pawak once about it, and I said, "What do you do? I mean, you're facing this terror, and every time you orient to cessation, the world melts around you, and it dissolves." And he basically said, "Yeah, it's very disturbing for people." And so I said, "Well, what do you do? That seems like a strange place to be abiding and practicing." And he said, "Oh, that's why you have the jhanas. You go to the jhanas, and you're in this great space, and everything feels good, and so you rest in the jhanas unless you're doing your practice." Wow. Well, also this suggests you need to be a monastic, because we're not going to be able to hold down jobs and relationships doing all this practicing. So there are two other approaches that I know to cessation. One is, there's one that if you do the samatha, the concentration practices, and you do the jhanas as they're taught in that lineage to the level of mastery, which means you can enter and exit at will. You can you can look into this mind mirror. There's a thing called the bhavanga, which is in the heart chakra. And when you look with the wisdom eye right after a practice, you can sometimes see the bhavanga. So it looks like when I was young, women had a little handheld mirror in their purse. They all did. They'd flip it open and do makeup or whatever. And so it's like this little mirror like that. And the first time Sayadaw told me this, oh yeah, look in the bhavanga and check, first jhana. And I was just like, okay, yeah, whatever. It sounded pretty out there to me. But lo and behold, I go to look, and here's this little mirror, and here's these, the jhana factors are represented in the mirror. So I could confirm first jhana. And so anyway, that's a part of the process. But when one can gain mastery over all 8 jhanas, then there's a potential, after concluding the 8th jhana, the base of neither perception or non-perception, that from the access concentration of 8th jhana, there's a possibility of orienting to what I write about as the 9th jhana, which is the absolute realm. So orienting to the absolute itself. And that can open. And one can enter into, and that can lead to cessation arising. So that's called Nirodha Samapatti, as I recall. And it's a fairly rare skill set. I haven't had any students that could do it yet, but I've known a couple of practitioners, teachers who can access that way. And so that's a possibility. It requires very, very good meditative concentration. I mean, you really have to be quite there to open that door. And the other way is through the guided meditations I do. People have experienced cessation through that. And it's done in a way, as you know, we're orienting to particularly the peace and stillness, the blackness, the absence too, but peace and stillness are the main vehicle. And as we move in there, because of this peace and stillness, it really gives a lot of comfort and it gives a lot of support for cessation to open. And when we encounter cessation, we encounter it, the experience is that it's composed of peace and stillness primarily, also absence and other qualities, but those are the main qualities. So when we're connecting, when we're letting go into cessation, we're letting go into peace and stillness. So in this approach, it's really a lot more pleasant approach, and it's not as jarring, it's not as destabilizing in that way. It still results, if one has 30-minute or longer experience, it results in an awakeness being activated. And that's true of Kensho as well. So that awakeness quality is available in cessation and Kensho both. So this is why I do the guided meditations, because I do have students who are experiencing cessation with these. And personally, I think if one can experience Kensho and cessation, it's ideal, because they're different. They're very similar in some ways, and they're very different in other ways, but they impact us differently. So it's really beneficial to have contact with both, in my view. So that's sort of the practice view of cessation. Any questions? There's two ways in that I know, which I don't talk about publicly. So I won't talk about here. But there are choice points. The people I know who have experienced it have gone in one of two ways only. Again, it's a very small sampling, so I don't know large numbers of people. But yeah, there is a way to do it, and there is a way to orient to it. I've given sort of the part of it, which is the time resolve, or I've shared that. But the other would need to be, I'd give someone the instruction if they were there. But it doesn't do any good to mention it beforehand, or people will try to play with it and think it's experiencing. And then I have to tell them politely, no. I haven't heard of anybody experiencing cessation from video. The Kensho they have, and I've confirmed a couple. And that I haven't been able to wrap my mind around that very much. But I had in the book Liberating the Self, there's one of the student accounts is a student who I did a guided meditation for them. We did, I think, a couple hours of orienting towards cessation, peace and stillness. And they, a short time later, went in for a 2-hour massage. And the person started the massage, and the student went into cessation and was in cessation for 2 hours. And the masseuse said afterwards, that was the most powerful spiritual experience of my life, being in the room with you.
I copied those pages and gave them to my masseuse.
Yeah. Did she fire you as a client, or was she?
She really liked it. She enjoyed it. I said, just in case it happens, you know what's going on.
That's great. That's great. I should I should have had a little disclaimer at the bottom to say, please give this to your masseuse. But it was, it was really incredible for both of them. I talked to the person, not the masseuse, but the person afterwards. And the masseuse was just, really affected, teary, emotional, all that you'd expect. And I thought about it from her perspective. Here she's in it for 2 hours with this person who's just basically comatose, and it's like, well, either I'm good or I'm really bad at what I do, And, but she could tell something important was happening, that was clear. But still, bless her heart to sit there for 2 hours and let it go the way it's going to go. That was pretty bold of her. I'm not sure everybody would have responded that way. In our lineage, if one experiences jhana, there won't be a sense of self. But whether they have a no-self experience, it's just the self is absent. So to me, with no self is a little bit more than just the self being gone. There also is a recognition that there's no self here. So I think that lets it land a little better. So I think it can happen, at least in my experience. One can be without self, but I don't know whether people would cognize that as a no self or not. It's possible, but I haven't seen it routinely. Well, cessation being a lights out experience where consciousness and awareness stop. And we're just steeping in the source at that point. We're completely merged, where there's no separation at all. And then when that separation happens, that time of being united, merged with cessation is just remarkable. And with Kensho, there's never a time when the lights go out. There's always awareness in it. So it's more, let's say it's more of an eyes open awakening, and cessation would be an eyes closed cessation in all respects. But it seems to impact us differently. So I think, as I say, my preference would be for all students to have both. It's not working out that way. There are people that have both, but it's more a minority than a majority. Yeah, I totally see why it's been such an important feature in Buddhism for so long. But I also think it would be, in my opinion, a service if more of the teachers that taught it with ways in that didn't have to go through the inside of terror, because I think it's really hard for people to do that.